I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Williams, CEO of Healome Therapeutics. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is part of our Through the Lens campaign, where we are talking to industry experts, leaders, to find out what's actually driving growth and what's holding it back in the UK life sciences ecosystem. So thank you so much for joining us today. Would you tell us a little bit about your journey? How does a research scientist end up being CEO of Healome Therapeutics?
Healome Therapeutics is a spin-out company from the University of Birmingham. So I was a postdoc at University of Birmingham. We were material scientists by background, and we spent about 10 years collectively using materials to either aid healing or deliver drugs around the body. With about the first 5 or 6 of those years, we started to morph from being just about the science into really wanting to convert the science into products and take them into patients. And we discovered that between the innovation, the technology, and the manufacturing, and getting it through the regulatory group, we realised that actually we were probably best positioned to drive that forward. So we ended up securing probably about 7 million in grant funding over those years to fill in those pieces from the science to the manufacturing and getting it through the trial approval. So it's more of a morphing really from science into a company within the university. For me personally, I loved being a scientist, but I really enjoyed the journey of learning about the regulatory side, building the strategy, working with my co-founders on the manufacturing side and looking ahead about the commercial strategy. So I sort of moved across from the university into the company, and there we are. We're properly in the same boat as other companies in raising capital and getting through all of the risky patches of taking a medical technology to patients. And here we are today.
That's fantastic. That's a really interesting story, because I think it's quite different to what other spin-out companies might have experienced in terms of what you did before you actually spun out. What are your kind of current challenges?
Finding venture capital firms that are really into the deep tech, deep science, understand the science and the time frames and risk to get there, and still have the confidence and conviction to put capital in was pretty important. We got there at the end, but there's not that many out there, particularly at a time where a lot of funds who were really keen on investing in pharma and biotech, who weren't specialists, but it was, there's a lot of capital in the space, were withdrawing because of the downturn in the market. So now you're left with fewer experts in that field. So we managed to navigate through that. One of the outstanding challenges that will probably affect a lot of biotech companies in the space is the ability to manufacture on a small scale for early phase trials. We're talking about a couple of 100 bottles for an early phase trial. That's been really challenging to find in the UK. And it's difficult because without that, you can't manufacture for trial. We can go abroad, but with Brexit, there's been some complications about how we get product back into the UK and testing quality again. So that's still a challenge. It seems to be a challenge in the US as well, from what we heard. We're looking across Europe and the rest of the world now. We have to, and just take the added regulatory complications to that. We have to, because we have to move as a company. One area we think does need support in the UK are those small manufacturing sites that are attached to hospitals or universities. They typically make what they call specials, so one-off orders for patients. They'll be great at manufacturing for small scale, but I think what they need is support from the regulators so that they can, keep running. So I think those will be an important point to drive innovation for biotech in the UK, and just hope they get the support that they need.
What are the key factors do you feel has actually helped your company and companies like yours to grow?
Clustering and communication between startups is a big thing. It's very, very useful because it means in a 5-minute conversation you can solve a big problem. I think the presence of the SCIS schemes has been important as well. Anything that breaks down the barriers and encourages people to invest in deep tech, relatively risky companies is a good thing, and we've certainly benefited from that in both of our rounds. And because of that first ticket from EIS, we're then able to generate interest in the rest of our rounds. So it's all about momentum. We've benefited from quite a lot of academic focused funding, and that's always been a bedrock of the UK. It's probably one of the best places, I'd say, in the world for funding basic research. What's been really good, I think, over the last 2 years is the rapid funding. So NIHR and Innovate UK are two that I know of personally from that, where it's 30 to 50k rapid turnaround, 1-2-page proposals, turn it around, and we want results in 6 months or 3 months. And that's fantastic for early stage companies where on its own it's not substantial enough to go for large scale funding, but then it's too small, too risky to attract private capital into.
Yes.
So I'd say that's where the UK has done very, very well. The capital question always comes up. And I think I'm speaking more broadly now across a lot of the companies who are bigger than us and smaller than us as well. I think that bridge from Series A upwards has been a challenge for some companies where, they're looking for the 50, 40 million plus and looking abroad to that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But of course, then there's always the risk of movement of technologies and capability out of the system. We've certainly seen that with early stage companies coming through where they've now hit the market because the market's contracted a bit. Investors are now doing deeper due diligence. They're wanting to answer questions that probably would have come up at Series A. And so companies having to scramble now to answer those questions around, regulatory pathway, market access and so forth. And I think in their minds is they've just set the company up. Where do they go next, when they haven't even raised money yet?
Yeah, it's difficult, yeah. And you're saying that investors are kind of expecting that sort of knowledge and ability to answer questions at an earlier stage. So those types of things would help.
I think it's a good thing, to be honest with you. And what we're seeing now is some of the best funds are saying, okay, but then what does this look like when we all collectively go out together, if we invest, and go out and get your Series A or your Series B? So they're almost doing the due diligence for the next stage of due diligence and try to get you positioned for that, which I think is a great thing. That's a way of getting companies to think a bit more long term and to get them into a position where they've got the best chance of raising the Series A, Series B going forward. So again, there might be some attrition in companies along the way, but what you'll end up with through that process, hopefully, is a very strong cohort of companies coming through in different areas in the UK going forward. Part of it's capital, the other part's know-how. Tap into the alumni that you have. People who have been through the journey, made a big success, got the exit. I mean, the US is very, very good at doing this. Parts of Europe are. Encourage them, the alumni for universities, for example, or a region, and bring that back into the next generation of companies coming through. I'll send a few examples where they've probably moved abroad, but they still have a very strong connection with the area.
Yeah.
But that communication has been lost over the years, which is a big shame, because not just the capital is useful, but their knowledge and expertise. So I think it needs to be a national and a regional thing as well.
Yeah.
Keep the skills and the capital in there. We have some really good centres of excellence in the UK. Again, in ophthalmology, there's some really leading centres here. The patients are here. I think I can speak on behalf of my co-founders as well. We've developed the technology in Birmingham. We'd love to manufacture in Birmingham, release in the UK, but it'd be great to get the first patients in the UK.
Yeah.
We want to have all patients across the world, ideally, utilize the technology, but it'd be great to be able to get people on your doorstep, relatively speaking, access to the technology and spread out. I was encouraged by the announcements from regulators like the MHRA the last 2 years or so, talking about acceleration. I'd like to see those come all the way through to fruition. I think they're great ideas about rapid approval of trials where, there's a twist on existing technology and focus expertise and accelerating really novel technology. I think that's great. I'd like to see the UK continue with efforts with connecting companies, so building clusters of companies together, get them communicating, sharing expertise amongst each other. What would be really good to sell the UK internationally is to have very, very clear messaging about what it's good at. I hear a lot of places across the world, and even within the UK, say world leading in life sciences, for example. That's a massive term. I don't think anyone needs to come with a big sell about that term. Personally, and from speaking to international companies, just talk about what you're really, really good at. We're really good at this thing. If you work in this space, you want help, come and speak to us about this. I think that's probably a better way of marketing things.
That's interesting, because I guess that big kind of strapline of brilliant in life sciences doesn't really tell people that on a sort of granular level where we are set apart from other jurisdictions, what our unique selling points are, if you like.
I look at it as if I'm looking for a CMO or a supplier, and when they say, oh, we can do everything, I know they probably can't, because I know the licensing system for manufacturing, so I know you probably can't. I don't want the conversation where we waste time getting to the stage where you find out you can't do the job. So I think companies would appreciate clarity on that. We're very good at this one thing.
Just to end on a sort of personal note then, where do you kind of ideally see Healome in 5 years' time?
We want to see our technology out there within the next 5 years, helping address several eye conditions of patients where they can turn blind from scarring and fibrosis, where they can't work or can't drive, can't have social lives. So I want to see us in the clinic, if not something fast-tracked. I would love to see us with a manufacturing base. The UK, we can use CMOs, but there's some a larger vision for the companies who want to innovate in manufacturing in this space as well. And I think we're best placed to drive that. That will be a multi-year project to plan that and find the appropriate capital, but I think that'll be key. The taxpayer paid for the research to be done here. What will be really great is to build the manufacturing capacity and the talent pool here, so that that capital recycles back into the economy and grow the region.
Another challenge I was wondering whether or not you'd encountered is actually finding the right talent to work in your company. Has that been a challenge, or do you foresee that being a challenge in the future?
Naturally, as a company, you want access to the best talent. However, in our space, particularly if we want to go into manufacturing, we need some pretty highly skilled quality pharma manufacturing people. And that could be in the UK, could be anywhere, but in some of the roles, you're competing with massive pharma companies who have remuneration packages that a startup's not going to compete with. And there are ways we can get around that. We want to grow homegrown talent, but equally we need to have the best talent in the world come in to take over certain operations. That's the balance of the two is going to be a key one. I don't know a lot about the visa immigration system for employers at the moment. We're just starting our journey on looking into that, but I've heard there are things changing there, and compliance is quite a big area for companies. I think for us, it's not just about making the business environment strong for them. I think the national government needs to think about making the UK an attractive place for people to live at the same time. We can give them a very good remuneration package, but if you're asking them to move to a city that, probably isn't looking as attractive to them, or infrastructure, or housing, cost of living, that kind of thing, you're not going to attract that kind of talent. So I think business need to do their parts to make sure they can offer really good packages, but I think the government needs to be mindful as well about making the UK an attractive place to live and grow as people there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's fantastic to hear all that and to hear you being such an advocate for, keeping things in the UK to the extent that it makes sense, and hearing your thoughts about what ways we can improve the ecosystem here to help companies like yours kind of stay in the UK, not have to go abroad for growth. So that's been really interesting. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, Rachel.